Welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Phil Arno. As our little corner of the universe deals with the coronavirus, a lot of questions still remain. We continue to hear the numbers every day. So many infected, so many deaths, some recovered. It's like a morbid version of sports scores so eagerly thrust upon us every time we turn around. Well, as much as I'd like to talk about romantic getaways on some tropical beach, or maybe the Buffalo Bills' upcoming season, or, God forbid, politics, I feel that I must continue to address the topic at hand, the virus. Yes, coronavirus. As long as there are more questions than answers, I owe it to you, like it or not, to at least be, as much as possible, a voice of reason and a source of answers to some of the questions that don't have anything to do with statistics. Towards that end, I'd like to welcome to this big picture our friend, Dr. Raul Vasquez. Welcome to the show. The last time we talked, your daughter Nadia was just getting over the infection. She had tested positive. How's she doing now?
Oh, she's doing great. You know, that's like, oof, you have no idea. Well, you know, it was a scary time in our family, in our family's time. So she's doing great now. I'm trying to, actually, we're trying to get her tested tomorrow on the blood test. And I could describe that a little bit, why that's so important to do the blood test once you get over this.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. Now, because you had somebody in the family who had tested positive, was anybody else affected in that household?
No, no one else. We kept the strict, the social separation and things like that. And then she was in a separate area where she was just there. We would bring her food and just the room was disinfected. She would go outside. But yeah, no one else got, thank God, nobody else was affected. I had moved my mom out, so she was not in the house. She had the highest risk to catching this, and thank God everything worked out for the best.
Would it surprise you, because I know this is a case that we've talked about before, would it surprise you if at some point you get tested in the future and it turns out that you had it, or somebody, the people in your household get tested and somebody had it, has gone through the whole thing but never had symptoms and developed antibodies to it?
Yes. Because that's the whole idea. The whole idea is some of us are there's these cells in the blood called plasma cells that when they get exposed to whatever it is, they will try to produce an antibody for it. What we're trying to do now is that blood test, which we're gonna all in the family get tested, just to prove what you proved, which is, we were all, either we caught it to the extent that it didn't affect our lungs, and now we're kind of over and hopefully protected for a month or 6 months as a result of having the antibodies in your system. But what the reason I'm also testing is another fearful component is, if the vaccine is going to work, then you give people a piece of this virus that's dead, and you mount an antibody response to that, and that's a good thing. But if we check IgG blood levels and you don't mount a response in that house, then I worry that the vaccine may not be able to work the way we want it to work. And it may be a little harder to develop a vaccine. So those are the things that I'm hoping to learn based on what we're doing.
Now, in principle, and you just kind of went over this, when you develop a vaccine, basically you're taking the virus and you're taking a dead version of the virus and introducing it into the blood of a person, and then the person's immune system basically attacks that version of the virus, which is dead, so it can't infect you, but the antibodies get used to that version of the virus, and now you become immune. Now, it sounds simple.
Right.
Why does it take so long to develop some kind of a vaccine like that?
Well, you have to find and make sure the pieces of the virus that you're finding actually make sense. And then you have to test to see how the antibodies, and then you got to test when you're giving it, because you're going to try this not in humans first, and then you got to make sure that it's doing okay, that you don't have a secondary effect, because you don't want the cure to be worse than the disease. So you don't want people really having a reaction to vaccines. So that's why it takes trials and trying a good number of people. And some people get the vaccine, some people get placebo, to see if this is actually doing what it needs to do. But it's real important.
Okay, well, you're getting into the testing now, and that's what we're going to talk about where we can get tested, and you're talking about, getting as many people tested as possible, and you're starting to do that in your area. You've got the Greater Buffalo United Accountable Healthcare Network, and you are starting to test people. First of all, where do you test people? And who gets tested, and how do they get tested, et cetera? Explain a little bit about that.
Well, we do a telehealth system, so we're talking to the patients through a video system, and instead of not bringing them in all together, we're doing almost a walk-through, drive-through. And what I'll do is I'll show you. Let me revert this camera a little bit so you could see. I'm outside of it, but the tents are right there.
Uh-huh.
People come in. We've had quite a bit of people, and there we're doing one of the two tests. So that's why if you see cars who just come in, they get checked in, they go through the process. Depending on what type of test they're going to have, it gets done this way, and it's just a lot easier to kind of organize it that way.
And who's able to be tested? Cars can pull in, but do you have to do something beforehand?
Absolutely. So we have our number that we have people calling into. It's a 604-0504.
Okay, we'll put that on the screen.
The nurse picks up the call.
Okay.
Yes, and the nurse call. I mean, you call the nurse. There's a checklist. You've got to have fevers, cough, and shortness of breath. I mean, it's not just testing everyone right now, especially for that kind of testing, because that's the nasal one that we talk about, and that's what you're doing that's when you have the virus. And there's things that we could do, and these are the individuals that can die if you get to that extent. If we're not doing the things that we need to do, not just testing everyone as a whole. We're talking to them. If we don't feel they're qualified to get tested, then we tell them the precautions and the things they need to do, like with the temperatures, taking the temperatures and things to avoid doing at home. And if you do develop, then we're going to tell you need to be tested. That's one. Number two are people that have had these symptoms in the past and we were not able to test. So they missed that window of testing and they feel better. Now we want to be able to do the blood test for the IgG to see if they had it. And what I told you is if we see IgG a lot, then I'm more comfortable that we're going to be able to get a vaccine. That's one. But now we could do contact tracing. We can go back to the household and find out who else in the house may have been infected or is still infected.
Okay, so are these two different tests for somebody that you suspect that has the symptoms now, and then people who had the symptoms but missed that window? Are those two different tests?
Yeah, and that's going to be real important because, like for me, we have 240 employees. We're testing all the employees in the next week. And what we want to do, even though they've been telehealth working from home, I find that because this, I know they think that the storm is over, but I don't see it in the next 2 weeks being over, is at least not only finding out which of my team has the antibodies for it because they had a milder form, and it'll be easier to use them in the field compared to those that don't, that we won't use in the field for the sake of, we don't want to get anybody sick during this time.
So should people call their doctor first and then call this line, or should they call the line and get advised by the nurse and then check with their doctor to tell them what's going on and what they want to do?
Yeah, I think always call your doctor first. If you don't, we're like a backup for that. So at least give you the instructions and figure out how to connect you with your doctor.
Okay. How long does it take to get these tests done? Is it just a swab for the one test and a blood test, blood drawn for the other test?
Yeah, so the nasal is quick because what the nurses do is because if you're in our network, we could just get all the information. We have it. We can create the forms. All you do is show up, you say your name, we swab you, take seconds, and you drive away. Then the nurses follow up with a call in 48 hours. That's why we need the call in to set the whole workflow going. Okay, that one's that. The one for the blood test is going to take a little bit longer, but we get you signed. We have you come in, and it's a blood draw. It'll take about maybe 5 to 8 minutes to do, between cleaning and doing the blood, making sure you're okay, and that's it. So about 5 to 8 minutes with the blood draws. It's going to take a little longer.
And you said within 48 hours for the results. Now, is that for both tests or just for the swab?
Well, for the swab, it take a day to do. I don't want to, so I say 48 hours just to be sure. For the blood test, it takes a day. So
Okay.
within a day's time, we'll be able to kind of let you know.
And how accurate are these tests?
Well, the nasal is accurate because they call it a NAT test. It's a nuclear acid amplification test. So it tells you that you have the virus, and if that's positive, you pretty much, it's the gold standard right now. With the blood test, it's about 95 to 96% in terms of sensitivity, specificity. So it's not the best yet, because you want it in the 95. I mean, you want it in the 99, range. So there's still that little gap, but I think as we do more of them, we'll get a better idea. It's a Quest lab, so these are certified FDA type of tests. So I think it's as good as it is right now.
In the coming days and weeks, is there going to be much more prevalent testing? Is that going to be more and more locations? And is it going to be available, to everybody in the foreseeable future?
I think that the numbers have to rise because based on the we've had about I believe 8,000 tests here, 8,000 tests in Erie County in the area of Western New York. That's not enough for the population you deal with. So you want to go up in the testing to get to the point that you're getting a 1 to 2% positives within the testing that you do. Right now we're at 26%. So any test that we're doing in Erie County is 26%. That tells you that we still have to test more in order to have that percent of positive come down to a point that it makes sense that we're okay now. But we're still getting about 26%
Is the
positive.
Erie County Health Department working with you on this?
Well, I think that's with the disconnect. I think the county's models are really old models in terms of they're not used to dealing with this type of scale. And I think their IT informatics, their call systems, they're trying to just stay above board with what they're having. Yeah, they're starting to get a little bit better when it comes down to reaching out, but there was not an intense sort of use of your primary care network in the community and a communication on a day by day to make sure that everybody, because we learn more heads in the room, the more we learn about what's happening in different parts of the area, so that you have an east side, west side, north side, south side, and doctors are seeing how this is affecting each of our areas and what things may be beneficial, almost like a response center. Listen, we found out that this is working for these particular individuals. Now we spread that information and at least learn from it, as opposed to everybody still in a silo. And we're waiting for the health department to figure this thing out when you've got ideas and concepts that are going on that are working in the community.
And how about all the doctors in the area? In Western New York, do the various doctors have a way of communicating with each other? And are they very active in kind of spreading the information? And how does that work?
Well, you've got like the Department of Health at the state level sends out things to doctors, but that's not always. It's okay. They're just sending information. Hospitals have their command center, but mostly for their hospital physicians and their groups. But then you have groups out here that don't have that kind of a network. We have Jabaco, which is an ACO, an accountable care, and we have about 250 providers there. So we've been relaying information back and forth and setting groups, especially for this kind of this plan that we try to implement in our different sections. And some groups came together. Our group, Urban Family Practice, and Jericho, which is an FQAC, came together because we're in the same areas, and we were just trying to figure out how we centralize testing, how do we centralize respiratory assessment units, how do we centralize tracing, so that we're all kind of sharing resources as opposed to trying to build our own resources.
Is this going to be something that we're going to be able to have various private practices such as yours commonly test now in the future, like privatizing tests commercially? Is that going to be a common practice now? You know, I think Dr. Shatkin was looking into having a testing center at his facility in Williamsville. And I'm not sure whether you talked to him about that or not, but you know, that was...
Yeah, we've talked. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we've talked in terms of looking at the model, and we're still, we're still looking at the ways to kind of make it work. I think, once the Abbott machines come out with the 5 to 15 minute positive or negative, it's gonna make it a little bit easier. It's just, remember, it's a new model. I think this year we'll learn quite a bit about it, but then going forward, yeah, it'll be part of your tools when you come into the office.
Hold those thoughts, Dr. Vasquez. We're out of time on this segment of The Big Picture. We'll be dealing with more coronavirus right after this.